Hey guys, it's Savannah. I wanted to recap the chief economist for the National Association of Realtor, Lawrence Yunn's kind of overview or outlook of where the housing market is headed for 2025 and 2026. And really what I thought was fascinating was the certain topics that he chose to hit on, how that's going to inadvertently affect the housing market, where it stands as a whole, and where he thinks it's headed. So things like homeowner wealth versus renter wealth, job growth, mortgage rates, and inventory, housing supply as a whole. So let's start things off with homeowner wealth versus renter wealth. And Yunn's point to this is statistics still show that homeowners are building wealth and equity on their homeownership purchases. And the gap between homeowner wealth and renter wealth is still massive. And until that starts to shrink, people are still going to lean towards the idea of owning real estate because they understand it's a great tool to building wealth. And in 2024, when they took a look at the average gap, the average homeowner wealth was around $415,000 versus the average renter's wealth was $10,000. So the gap is pretty substantial. And so Yunn's point, and really everyone's point as a realtor, is just reiterating that the overall game plan to getting into real estate isn't necessarily timing the market, it's time spent in the market. So the sooner you get in, the sooner you can start building wealth. Point number 2 to discuss is job growth overall since COVID-19. And Yunn pointed out the trend has overall been positive. We've seen more jobs come to the market since COVID-19. And the obvious theory there is as long as jobs continue to grow, opportunities continue to grow, buyers can access this opportunity, gain wealth, improve their affordability and their accessibility to getting into the housing market. And as long as this trend continues where more jobs are coming to the market, it's not unreasonable to think that then subsequently home sales would also increase in 2025 and 2026 as jobs become more available, accessibility to home ownership becomes more available, and the overall understanding that homeownership is still a great way to build wealth. So the theory behind this is, obviously Yunn's pointing out, this is a great news. Job growth is continuing to increase. And if that trend continues, the opportunity for homeownership will become much more readily available to the average consumer, which has been a problem that we have seen in the last couple of years through interest rates, housing prices, and just the overall tough part of the job economy and finding jobs that pay enough to afford where housing currently is at. Perhaps one of the most anticipated topics for where we are headed in 2025 and 2026 for home buyers is interest rates. What's going to happen? What can we expect? And whether you look at Lawrence Yunn's prediction or pretty much any other lender that you talk to locally, are we going back to 4% from the pandemic market? No, unfortunately, we will not be going back there, probably not for some time. And I can kind of explain to you what Lawrence Yunn emphasized is why we can't. But the idea being that his predictions are that interest rates will most likely fall between the 5.5% and 6.5% rate, the average being right around that 6% interest rate. And while the Fed is likely to make another 4 cuts over the 2025 timeframe and another 6 to 8 over the next 2 years, that's really where we're ultimately going to end up. And the reason really being that the US economy has a massive budget deficit. And unless our new elect can come up with a clear plan on how to reduce the budget deficit, we will not see mortgage rates come back down. So that's really the reality is we've got to see something happen with that in order to see a big change in those interest rates. Ultimately, the change that most homeowners are looking for, or home buyers, I should say. So until that happens, I would go ahead and anticipate rates to be somewhere between that 5.5% to 6.5% rate, averaging around 6%. And the last point to sort of discuss today is inventory, Yunn's predictions on home sales and where that's headed as a nation. Obviously here on the hyper-local level, we are definitely seeing a more normalized balanced market. The scale is not necessarily tipped in the seller's favor, other than specific little communities in Palm Beach County where we are still seeing very much seller market conditions. But overall, in most of Palm Beach County, we're seeing a neutralized, very balanced market. And so obviously Yun's predictions are based on the United States market as a whole. So there will be some difference depending on where you're at and what your market looks like. But his predictions overall as a market is that we will see a 10% boost of existing home sales in 2025 and 2026. He also predicts that new home sales will be 11% higher in 2025 and 8% higher in 2026. The median home price, he predicts to be 2% higher in 2025 and 2026. So he's still anticipating that home prices will increase. Look, 2 to 5% is average. So again, the idea is get in sooner. The longer you can hold real estate, the more wealth that you can continue to acquire. And then the other idea being that, home sales is still increasing, even though inventory is increasing. I think the really overall idea is that we're going to see a more balanced market overall. This means opportunities for sellers and opportunities for buyers.